Adoptions podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Griffith, and this is my co host, Heidi.
Hello.
And today we have Samantha Wylant, and she is a birth mother, and we love birth mothers because they're awesome. And we're here to share her story, and we're so excited to have you on. It's been interesting to try to get scheduled, it hasn't it?
Yes, it has. It has. So I appreciate your grace and patience with me
Well, it is
in
hard
my
because
crazy
you
schedule.
have your other kids, and then it's the time difference, and just trying to find. I
Yes.
mean, and I have kids, and she has. I mean, we're all trying to
Yeah,
figure it out, all
we
surviving.
are. But we're here. That's all that matters.
Yeah, that's all that matters. So, walk us through your whole kind of adoption story, whatever you're comfortable with sharing. We'd love to hear kind of either right when you got pregnant or maybe a couple months leading up to when you got pregnant, and
Yeah.
how long ago was the placement?
It was almost a decade ago. So it was
Okay.
2015. Yep.
Okay. Okay. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So if you want to just start kind of maybe a couple months before you got pregnant, and then just take us kind of through the whole story and relinquishment
Yeah.
and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So go.
Well, so my story began in 2011 when I met the birth father. So we were in a relationship and a long-term relationship where we were ring shopping, and I thought this was the person I was going to be with. But about 6 months into the relationship, it became very abusive, emotionally, mentally, and then at the end, physically. So although we were still together, for those years, it was just very unhealthy, very toxic, which I didn't share with a lot of people because from the outside looking in, everything really looked perfect. And all my friends thought I was really happy, and my parents. But in reality, I was actually saving money on the side each month to move out. We were living 12 hours away from friends and family for his job. So I was in a state that I knew no one. I mean, I had made friends and I had a job, and I was meeting people, but I really just had him. And ultimately what happened is there was a physical altercation and the police were called, and I left the house and I never went back there again. um, Fast forward a couple months, him and I rekindled, and that's when I discovered I was pregnant. So seeing those two pink lines, I really thought I had the flu, and I was just shocked. I'd always been so careful, and then just knowing that I had finally gotten out of this relationship, finally kind of regained my freedom. I was able to do what I want. I mean, it was such a controlling relationship. I didn't have any friends. I didn't, do much of anything except with him. And so I was just so excited to start living my life again. I was in my early 20s, and I just couldn't believe it. I mean, I was just in denial. And so, I mean, from that first day, all I did was just start praying. What am I supposed to do? And I didn't feel ready to parent, and I knew I wasn't going to get back with him. But I also knew, at this point, I was in my own apartment, and I knew I couldn't stay living in that 600 square foot apartment with a baby, single, making minimum wage, 12 hours away from family. And I didn't know what to do. And, I knew I've always been pro-life, and I knew that's not something I could do. And so I immediately started researching different agencies. I would call and just get some general information. And I really just hit it off with one counselor in particular, with an adoption agency. And so we just went from there, and she started sending me little booklets every couple weeks of new families. And um, it was, I mean, it's so hard to find the family, that is going to raise your child. There were so many things I wanted for this family and for this um, child to have. And, there were several families I was speaking with, but when I met the one family, we really clicked. We had so much in common, very similar values, and they were one of three families. And with this agency, it was not common to meet before placement. And I was really bummed about that because I knew that they lived 3 hours from me. And I was like, I mean, this was a national, so I was, it could have been anywhere, but they lived 3 hours from me.
You're
And I
like,
was
can I
just,
just do like a drive by? Is that like hope
yes,
they're out in front? Like,
I know it's only 3 hours away.
and swing by, you're like, oh, this is fancy meeting you here.
exactly. Yes. And that's exactly how I felt. So I was praying for that. I was like, oh, I just pray, that this can just happen organically where we can somehow meet. And about with this family, what drew me so much other than our similarities was that they had a son already who was adopted as well. And I know so many birth moms, want to place this to be their first baby and all, but I actually wanted my son to go to a home where I knew he was going to have a sibling, because adoption is expensive and sometimes they don't adopt again. And that was one thing I was like, I want him to have a sibling for sure. And an older brother. How cool. And so anyway, after praying about this, the adoptive mom, she emailed me and said, I know we're not supposed to be doing this, but would you want to meet somewhere?
Oh
We
my
we would
gosh.
we would love to drive up for the day and meet you.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so yeah, it was really cool. And we met at a museum, so it was, child or kid friendly for her son, for their son. And the second I met them, I mean, I really felt just kind of a connection with just my soul, just really felt something like just hugging her that first time. And the husband too. I mean, both of them are just amazing. And I spent the day with them and, got to ask all the questions, and like, it was never awkward. It was like just talking to a friend or a sister. And when I first started listening to this podcast and I was listening to Mackenzie interview Hillary, who was another birth mom, she talked about past lives and making that pact or a contract with someone. I never thought about it that way. And now, because myself and the adoptive mom, I mean, people actually think we're sisters when we're together. People just, I mean, we look alike, we sound alike, we're like both type A from the Midwest. There's so many similarities. And I truly believe that. And when I heard that from Hillary, I immediately texted her and the adoptive mom, and I said, oh my gosh, you know, have you ever thought about this? And she said, yeah, that makes so much sense. And I truly believe that we either were sisters in a past life or best friends, and that she knew she was going to have this struggle in the next life, and maybe I knew I wouldn't be in the place, and I'm going to pick her to raise him because she's so much like me. And so anyway, our sisterhood and friendship has just continued to grow. Needless to say, I picked them, and
You're
I
like,
was
or could
about,
we just be best friends? Even if I don't pick you, can we still be friends?
yes. And I was about 7 or 8 months along at that point. And so, the next several weeks, we just communicated through email. We didn't have each other's phone numbers um, or Facebook or anything with social media. We were just emailing each other. And but we both agreed on an open adoption, and I was really excited. And when I had him, he was a couple weeks early, and I had actually moved out of my apartment and was staying with a friend because I knew after placement I was probably not going to stay there. I didn't know if I didn't know what I was going to do, if I was wanting to move back home for a little bit or just need a change of scenery. But I was staying with a friend short term, and woke up at 6 a.m. to my bed covered. My
Oh
water broke.
no.
And I mean, I was not prepared. I didn't have a hospital bag packed, which, I wasn't bringing a baby home, but I mean, I had nothing. So I'm like, well, I'm sure you have some time. Everyone says the first one. No, I did not have time. Had just started packing my bag when I felt that first contraction. And within 10 minutes, they were less than 2 minutes apart.
Oh my
My
gosh.
Yes, for the first baby, that it happened very fast. So I was living in DC, So it's 6 in the morning, rush hour traffic.
Oh my
My
gosh.
friend is running every red light, and I'm convinced I'm going to have him in the back seat of the car. And I mean, that was very traumatic. I really thought that was going to be my birth experience.
Oh my
There
gosh.
was hardly time to call the birth father, and but we did get a hold of him, and he made it to the hospital, and then of course we called the family, and they, dropped everything and left. So they weren't there when he was home, or when he was born, because it happened so quickly.
Yeah.
But I got in, and I there wasn't even a room for me, so I was basically having a baby in the OR.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, but the birth father, he did get there, and so it was just me and him, which wasn't the plan. But I will say that was such an intimate thing, and I think that's what needed to that was what needed to happen.
Yeah.
That's how it needed to be. It was really special because even though I knew there was not going to be a relationship with me and him, he's a good person, and he it was heartbreaking for both of us, and no one is going to know what th- this felt like except me and him. And so we had a good 2 or 3 hours with our son until we invited the family in to meet him, and it was very emotional. I mean, I sometimes it feels like it's so long ago, and sometimes it feels like it was just yesterday. It just kind of feels like a dream sometimes, the whole experience. I had written a letter to him, and I had put together an album for him. I had a friend that was a photographer, and she did some maternity pictures. So I had some maternity pictures in the album, and all of his ultrasounds, and the letter I wrote to him, and my favorite song, just a couple different things, to remember me. And then there was a lot more blank pages for us to continue with future get-togethers that we could add to his album. And so I just wanted him to have that gift as he grew up and knew about me. And you never really know that day what open adoption is going to look like.
Yeah.
People say one thing, and so I didn't know what it would look like, but I am so blessed to say today that he was the ring bearer in my wedding. He was the ring bearer in my brother's wedding. We've done spring breaks together, fall breaks. They've visited us when both my kids were born, and that is his half
Amazing.
sibling. And I've just been very blessed. And the family I picked, I mean, they are just more than adoptive parents. They are family. I mean, they are the most loving, compassionate people. They were the people I prayed for the whole time to raise him.
Did
So
you how did you tell the birth father, and kind of what was his reaction? Because you guys weren't together, and like you said, it was
yeah,
tumultuous. So like what was that situation like for you?
it was traumatic. We were not on the same page. He was he was wanting to get back together and raise this child. And I didn't know what that was going to look like, because I knew for a fact I was not going to get back into that relationship. It was just abusive and toxic, and I knew I couldn't go back there. Um, but he had a job that he couldn't move, and I had nothing tying me there. If I were to parent and move 12 hours away where I had support, then what was that going to look like? I didn't want our son to only see his father a couple times a year. It was very important to me that this child had two parents in the home. And I am traditional. I know that's not the way everyone is, but that is what I wanted.
Yeah.
That was important to me. So yeah, it was hard for him. Like I said, we weren't on the same page, but I think once we found the family, and he was part of that visit as well when they came up, I think we both knew that was what we needed to do. It took him a little bit longer.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. Because sometimes I think when it doesn't feel real, like it's real, but it doesn't feel real. And it's a split decision. Like you said, I'm very much pro life too, which is why I thought about abortion for a split second when I got pregnant. And I was like, no, like, you don't believe in that. Like, what are you doing? And that's not an
Yes.
option. And so
Yeah.
you kind of run through all the scenarios and all the anger and all the stuff that comes along with all the emotions of like, oh no, I'm pregnant and this was not part of the plan.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
And when you picked the family, you felt like this was his family, right? I mean, did you
Yeah.
immediately feel that way? Like just looking at their, what would you call it? Like profile, just looking at their profile, you felt like that?
No, like I said, I mean, I loved reading their profile and reading about them, and there were so many similarities, but at that point there were two other families, and that's when I just kind of prayed like, oh, just give me a sign, like this one family is so close. If something can happen organically where I could meet them, and ultimately them making the effort to come see me
Yeah.
and spending the day with them and really seeing how they were as parents, it was, and they were also the most open about adoption. Like they had a lot of experience with adoption because their first was adopted. Um, and they had friends who'd adopted, and they had a lot of experience. They were very open to it being open. And there were other families who said they wanted quote unquote open, and that was sending pictures throughout the year, and that's not what I envisioned. i
Yeah.
i did want what I have today. That's what I wanted, that's what I prayed for, is to be a part of each other's lives. And they had that same vision. And so that's ultimately how I knew when
Once you
I,
met them.
yeah, and the stars just aligned.
Yeah. Just very serendipitous, I guess you could say. And I think every birth mom that I have spoken to, the friends, even my own placement, it's the way that it worked out with the family that I ended up placing with, and sounds like you ended up placing with, and it was easy. Kind of like dating, like when you're dating someone and it's
Yeah.
easy, you're like, oh, okay, this is gonna work out.
It's comfortable.
It's comfortable.
Yeah.
And I felt the same with the adoptive family too. It was comfortable, it was easy, like all the stars aligned, everything fell into place. Like me and the adoptive family picked the same exact name for the baby.
Yes,
Uh,
that's what happened with us.
oh my
Yeah.
gosh, seriously? Okay,
Yes.
tell me how that all happened and what, like.
So yes. So their first son had a biblical name and they wanted to follow suit. And so we had it down and I said, I love that. And I said, these are, three biblical names that I like. And she said, she loved all of them too. And I said, well, this book is my favorite book of the Bible. And she said, that's the one that we wanted. And so like we just, even the name we agreed on. And so it was really easy coming up with his first name. And then his middle name is actually a shared uncle on both of, like, my favorite, one of
Oh,
my favorite uncles, and hers is a family name as well. So that's his middle name.
that is so crazy. And so then you think to
Yeah.
yourself, okay, this was meant to be. Like adoption was always the plan. Like they were meant to have this child specifically, even though maybe it wasn't coming in the way that they anticipated. It is funny that you say biblical name because that's what I wanted too. And
Mhm.
because I was talking to my cousin um like, I don't even know what I was gonna say one name and then the another name like popped out of my mouth and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's his name. Like that is his name, 100%. And I called the family because my caseworker was like, oh, tell him what the name is. And I was like, okay. So I, tell him the name and she starts crying. And I was like, oh no. I was like, she's thinking
Hates
that
it.
like
Hates it.
she hates it. Like it's probably an ex-boyfriend that she just hates so much. And she's like, no, we like picked the same name. And like we've been praying about this. Like and her husband is culturally from Africa. And so like the firstborn son is supposed to have, the
That's
dad's name. And so he was like
Okay.
so
Yeah.
adamant. He's like, no, he needs to be named after me. And she's like, we kept praying and praying and praying and praying. And she's like, and we kept getting like answers that this one name was going to be his name. And she's like, and then when you said it, she's like, that just like solidified the name.
Yes.
And
Oh,
you're
that's
just like, how is
crazy.
this? And then you're
Yeah.
like thinking, you're like, how do people not know God exists though?
I
That's
know.
a
I
mental.
know. It is so God. Everything from start to finish has been orchestrated by God. Like none of this is my doing or her doing. It's God. And like you said, before I was even here, this was going to be our plan, for me, for him, for the adoptive family.
Yeah.
So
And how did
yeah.
you feel during the pregnancy? Did you feel, because I didn't feel super connected. And I don't know if it's because
Yeah.
I had already like known I'm placing this baby for adoption. So like don't get like subconsciously like don't get connected to this child. Like how
Hmm.
were you feeling during the whole pregnancy?
The same. I didn't want to get connected. I was so scared to get connected. And I wanted to pretend like it didn't exist. I wanted to, like I said, I was still in my 20s, my early 20s, and with friends that were, going out. And I mean, I tried to do those things and just pretend like this isn't happening. Like I wasn't drinking and doing drugs, but I was
Yeah.
still, having very much of a social life because I wanted to just pretend like, yeah, I'm still 24 and, um, and but there would be times like in the evenings when I would sit with God and I would get emotional and I would pray and I would talk to my belly all the time, which I said I wouldn't do because I didn't want to get connected. But I would in those times when I would be really emotional, I would talk to him and I would tell him why I'm doing this and that, I love him so much. And, you know, in a perfect world, I would have loved to be his mom, but I was not in the place I could be the mom I wanted for him. And I knew this is what I had to do. And I put that in my letter, but I would say that to him too. And then actually when I placed or after I had him, I did breastfeed in the hospital. I wanted him to have the colostrum, and I know that's a no-no too. I mean, that's such a bonding experience, and it
Mhm.
was. But I everything that happened in the hospital, I don't regret anything. I am thankful I got to breastfeed him those 3 days. I'm thankful I got, to give him just a little piece of me. Um, and I wasn't scared of that bonding because I knew this is what I need to do to feel like I will have no regrets at the end of this. And God just He has just blessed me and taken care of me. I mean, it hurt like hell. I don't think there's anything I will ever do in my life more painful than that day. And there are still times I think back on that day and just, you know, I was so young and just I was so scared, but I wish I could, tell that person almost 10 years ago that it's going to be okay and this is going to be the greatest blessing of your life.
That's a really it's interesting to me the birth moms that I've spoken to how um emotionally resilient each one of them are. Because hearing you say that, saying like, if I could talk to her 10 years ago and tell her like everything is going to be okay, this is going to work out. And a lot of, and I'm not going to say all birth moms, because we talked about this earlier, how there are a lot of birth moms who still feel very angry and that it wasn't the right choice. But if you could just go back and give if I could go back and give my 19-year-old self some advice, I'd probably say the same thing.
Mhm.
Like, it works out, you're going to be okay. Like, you're
Yeah.
resilient. Like, you're
Yes.
gonna,
Well, and the birth moms too have not regretted the choice that they made,
yeah,
even knowing the pain and the anguish that came
yeah,
from placing, they still wouldn't have changed it.
yeah, and
And I think that that's a huge thing. Just
yeah.
speaks of their love of the child.
Well, and it's a weird thing too, and I'm sure you feel this way too, Samantha, is it's going to be painful, right? To place a baby. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
that, but I didn't know how painful. Like, when
No
you
one.
relinquish, it's the
Well,
worst feeling ever.
there's nothing you could do that could prepare you for something
No,
like
I
that.
know, because you can
I
when
mean,
you're
I think
teenagers, your parents tell you, don't do this, don't do that, and you're like, yeah, 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 and then you do it anyways. You're like, why didn't anybody tell me? And your parents like, we did tell you.
Yeah.
You just didn't listen.
yeah, there's nothing that could even come close to what you have to
Yeah.
do.
Does does the birth father have any contact still? Like, I obviously you are very integrated in your son's life. So does his birth father, is it the same level or is it not as much? Like, what is that scenario?
Yeah, he is still involved, and I've seen him over the years at birthday parties and in different events. Um, Maybe not the same degree as me because I think we really have made an effort to see each other as much as possible with me and my husband now having two kids. Um, that's been really important to us, and the weddings and, you know, all the things. So maybe not to the same level, but he is involved, and he loves seeing him and seeing the family too. So yeah, it's great that our son is going to grow up knowing both of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's very rare.
That is very rare because my birth
Yeah.
son doesn't want anything to do with his birth father.
Yeah,
Yeah.
most
Oh
of,
yeah.
adopted children say they want to know the mom,
Yeah, the mom.
but the father's
Mhm.
not big a priority
And
for some reason.
yeah, I don't know. And yeah, I don't know if I don't even know if birth fathers, like you could probably ask a birth father why they wouldn't want to be, and they wouldn't even know the answer to that either. Because I
No.
don't think it's very rare that also a birth father would like to be involved.
Mhm.
From experience. I
Yeah.
just because I think as moms, you know, we carry the child and we
Yeah.
have that connection from day one.
Yeah.
And okay, so what I want to know, like my biggest fear when placing was like, I'm not going to see him grow up. I don't know how he's going to turn out. What was
Mhm.
your biggest fear with your son? Because you had an open adoption, so you could see all those things. What did you have any fears like going into adoption? Like, oh my gosh, is he going to hate me one day, or is he going to like, you know?
Yeah, I think the two biggest fears I had, and we talked about this, just being in different birth mom groups and seeing some of the negative stories. I was like, oh gosh, please don't let this happen to me. You know, like you said, you can say it's an open adoption that day, but there's nothing legally binding. So if something happens and they're just like, hey, it's not in the best interest, they can take away that right. And that was my biggest fear. I was so worried. I prayed and prayed and prayed, God, I'm trusting you to that I'm picking this family because I will get to see him grow up and I will get to be a part of his life. Please don't take this away from me. And so that was my biggest fear, is that something happening and them you know, just going back on their word and, you know, just not living up to what we discussed would be an open adoption.
Yeah.
But to your point, that it's still a fear of mine, is the abandonment and how he's feeling. I think as he's getting older, he is having a lot more questions, and I still want to have that one-on-one time with him where I can really explain everything without, you know, bashing his birth father, but just explaining why I did what I did.
Yeah.
And I want it to be positive for him, and I want him to know, like, it was not because I didn't want to be your mom. I like I said before, I wanted to be his mom more than anything, but I was not ready, and and there were so many factors against me. It wasn't my time.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think even as we continue to get older, as he continues to get older, I still want to have that one-on-one talk with him and just lay it all out there for him. And I know he has questions for me because I, you know, talk to his mom all the time about it, and that they're starting to become more frequent. But that's still a fear of mine, that one day he is going to be upset with me, and I hope he doesn't hate me. I hope he doesn't, you know, cut me out of his life. Um, and I hope that just throughout all of it, we can just always be open with each other and, you know, talk about it all.
Yeah.
It's hard to talk about, but I want him to know I'm there for him.
Has he ever, I mean, I know because he's 12 now, or is he
9,
9?
9 or 10.
Yeah, almost 9.
Almost 9. Okay.
Almost. Yeah.
So obviously, yeah, he's still young. Has he ever, I mean, I know you said his mom, he talks to his mom about it, but have you ever had any one-on-one conversations yet with him? Or has he ever come to you to ask questions? And what questions were those that he has had at not almost 9 years old?
No, he hasn't had like very serious questions for me. He likes to go through my phone. I have an album on my phone of like all the pictures from the hospital, and those are some that even his parents haven't seen. You know, they were just like pictures I took, just him and I. So he likes seeing those pictures, and we talk about it, and he has asked, but like I said, I think he is kind of young. He doesn't know the questions to ask
Yeah.
right now. And when we've been around each other, it has been at, you know, his birthday party or my kids' birthday
Yeah.
parties, and there's a lot going on. And
So
that's
not
why,
maybe the right place.
Yeah.
yeah, I would love those like uninterrupted moment, just me and him, where he could ask me questions. And
Yeah.
you know, like at 9 years old, he may not, you know, have the exact questions
He doesn't
he
know.
right now, but I know as he heads into like adolescent years, he's going to have so much more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what Mackenzie said, because with her son,
Is he 12?
he's 12.
Okay, maybe that's where I got the 12.
Yeah, he's like 12, but she says that it's always changing because
Well,
as he gets older,
Yeah.
more questions start popping up, and he actually spends the night at her house.
Okay.
So
there-
they have
Yeah.
sleepovers
Yeah.
and everything.
Well,
so,
and I think like when I first met my birth son, he was 15. He didn't talk very much. He sat like I was sitting on a chair and he sat on the armrest of the chair and just like watched me go through like albums of when he was like younger, like all the things that I had
Yeah.
kind of missed out on. And then his sisters who were adopted were like asking me questions just about birth
Yeah.
moms in general, right?
Yes.
And then when he became 18, 19, and he moved out actually to Utah to go to school for a year, he would come up to my house and I have 3 boys, right? Like currently. So he would come up and hang out with us on Sundays and go to church and things like that. And there were a couple times that he would want to be alone with me to ask me questions, but even still at
Yeah.
20, he didn't even really know how to phrase those questions.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like he's like, I have a lot to ask you, but I also don't know how to ask you this
Well, because he doesn't want
question.
to hurt you, probably, or he doesn't.
I
you
mean,
think
yeah, I
it's
think it's part of it, but
how to approach it.
I also think he's a boy. Boys,
I was just getting ready to say I think it's a boy thing too. Yeah.
Like-
They're not as emotional.
no.
Mm.
And I think honestly at least with Jacob, I'm like, he probably won't ask me questions until he's married. Cause it just
Yeah.
does
Or
not
maybe
even,
when he has kids.
or maybe when he has kids, like he doesn't, it's
Yeah.
just not on his radar. And cause he's 20 and let's remember when we were 20, like, are we asking our parents for questions or advice, even though we weren't adopted? Like, no.
Yes.
Well, see, and I think the difference is you met him at 15, right?
Mhm.
And she's been
she's
a
known.
part the whole
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
So, I mean, it's going to be like, it would be completely different.
Yeah. And I'm sure
Mhm.
some of your son's questions are probably going to be answered as he hangs out with you and
Yes.
as he
Mhm.
has experiences with you and your family and things of that nature,
Yeah.
So,
Well, I know
Yeah.
the last time we were together, he asked me, if you had kept me, would my last name be Wylant? And I'm like, no, there would be no of my husband or the kids. They weren't even a twinkle in the eye. It's just so crazy because, like, if I had chose to parent, then I wouldn't have met my husband today and had
Yeah.
my kids.
were-
Like, it would have been a whole different path. And so, we talked about that, like the last names, and so it's very like surface level questions.
Yeah.
Whereas if it was a girl, we would have a checklist of the things
Oh,
because we're women and analyze everything. But boys are like, all right, I'm adopted.
yeah, like, cool. I know I
I
asked
got two.
Jacob,
boys.
like, oh, well, how do you feel about being adopted? He's like,
I'm
fine.
adopted.
Yeah,
like
I
like
know.
I'm just adopted. He's like, I don't know what you mean by that. And I was like, what? I'd be like having like a novel of like, okay, so I'm adopted, and like, what does my mom look like? Do I look like her? Do I look like my dad? Like, do I have his eyes shaped? Do I have this? And he's just like, eh.
I always ask my kids that.
I-
I always think about
Yeah,
that
she
too.
adopted her 4 kids, so she's
Okay.
on the
Yes.
other
Yes.
spectrum.
So
Yes.
yeah, I'm indebted to birth.
Oh, do you have a relationship with the 4 birth moms? Is it 4 different birth
No.
moms?
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
3 different birth moms. My 2 girls
Okay.
are biological siblings. They're 10 and a half
Yeah.
months apart. So
Oh
they
wow! Oh my
actually
gosh!
I know.
Yeah. don't.
Woo!
Yeah.
Don't do that.
I survived with a perm. That's all I can tell you. I had to get a perm. I don't know how I survived looking back.
Yeah.
The pictures you want to burn, but it's okay. I do it again. But and
Aw.
my boys each have different. But so my girls have each other to look at to see what a sibling would look like. And then my youngest, his situation's different too because his biological sister placed 2 children through the agency, but to my siblings. So I
Okay.
have they're my one niece that's with a sister, and my other sister has a nephew, but they're his niece and nephew, but cousins.
Oh,
Oh, that's amazing.
So they're
yeah,
cousins in our family, but they're
like they're real, like
biologically
biological cousins.
his niece and nephew.
Oh, they're because it's his sister.
His sister.
His sister
his
plays the
biological
baseball. Okay, so
sister.
he's the uncle,
Yes, he's their
but he's the
uncle.
cousin.
Yes.
That makes the family tree
Oh.
complicated.
yes.
So because I got Zach through the agency, when a birth mom gets pregnant again, and she comes back, then we reach out to the family that has the child from, that got the previous child. So
Yeah.
no one knew that his mom even placed a baby for adoption. He was the fourth in his line. He
Okay.
was her fourth child, and she had her tubes tied. So I'm saying this explains this child. I mean, that's all you have to know about that child. He saw something. He's like, no, it's not going to stop me. I'm just going to keep going. And
I mean, I guess
that's
resilience.
literally his personality is still that way.
Resilience.
So
Oh my gosh, she got pregnant with her tubes tied.
yes,
That is scary. Don't tell me that. I have my tubes tied.
Yeah, don't tell me that either, because I'm fertile Myrtle over here, and I was. We're done now. We're done. I'm not having a fourth.
No, yeah. So
I know my husband looks at me and I'm pregnant. I'm like, don't tell me that.
Yeah. So no one in the family knew she placed a child. Then her daughter came to her pregnant, which would have been his older sister because he was the youngest. And she's like, I can't keep this baby. And so that's when his mom said, I had a child placed for adoption, placed him for adoption. We can contact that agency that I placed through. And so they called, and then they called me, and they're like, okay, so do you want this baby? I'm like, wait a minute. Because my son was 13 and he's my youngest. And so I'm like, that's 13 or 14. I'm like, that's a pretty good. I'm like, and let me tell you, I have 4 kids, boom, boom, boom.
Like
so
back.
yes. So I started at 25. I was done by 29.
Oh my gosh.
Literally, I had 4 kids in that time period. So I haven't had a newborn. It seemed like I was getting a newborn every year almost. I was like, oh, it's a new year. I get another baby. But so literally when I say I didn't sleep for like a very long
You
period
really
of time,
didn't sleep.
I literally just didn't get any sleep. But so I'm like, can someone else in the family,
take this baby?
Because ultimately I would want to keep the baby in our family. So
yes,
no matter
of course.
what. So so then we went down the line. There's 10 kids in my family.
in her family.
So so there's enough of us.
Wow.
And so one's like my sister that got the boy was the first. She ended up adopting him, but she had just miscarried before.
Oh.
And let me tell you, so she got him and found out she was pregnant.
Oh.
When she went to pick it up.
That usually happens. Haven't you heard of that happening all the time? People
all the time.
Her 2 boys are very close together too.
Oh, I couldn't do that as mom.
And then she got pregnant again. And we're like, come on, we're running out of people that will take babies here. So I'm like, and my sister Mindy, she's the third in our family line. Kenzie's the fourth, but that had got Xander. But Mindy's like, she had 3 boys, and she's like, I think we might just be done. And we kept saying, this has to be your daughter. And she was fighting us tooth and nail because she's stubborn like that.
Yeah.
And then she says all of a sudden she woke up and she felt really strong. God said, this is your daughter. You need to stop it.
She's like, dang it.
Yeah, she did. And that child is so spoiled. I call her Miss Leela. And she's a Miss Leela.
Okay.
She's a cheerleader. And their family is like, they come out and they have muscle. I mean, like legit.
I had a friend like that in high school, and I was always like, how do you have biceps? Like, you don't do anything.
My
Why
son,
do you have abs already?
He was like,
right?
He was 3 months old and he had biceps. He
Oh my
literally had
gosh.
muscles. I'm like, and then he actually had a hair, like a head and then hair.
Like head and then separate hair.
Like huge. I actually
like kid and play.
Yeah, I actually cut his hair when he was 3 months old.
Oh my gosh.
That's how much hair.
My kids are all bald.
And then his lashes are amazing.
Oh, that's not fair. That's rude.
I mean, he's beautiful.
That's not fair.
Oh,
they have very beautiful
features.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're very strong-willed personalities. Yeah. The daughter's the same way. Xander, the other one, he's the in between the two. He's not. He's quieter.
Yeah.
But Zach, he's a piece.
He's a piece.
Yeah, he's my baby.
I love it. That's hilarious.
There's a reason he was the last
yeah.
one.
I know there's a reason I was the youngest in my family too, because my mom was like, we would have stopped for sure after you.
That's how I feel
I mean-
about our 2-year-old right now. If he had been first, never again.
Right?
Yeah.
So do you have all boys and girls? Like what's
Girl, a 4-year-old girl and almost 2-year-old boy. And my son and my birth son look identical.
Oh,
They
okay.
they look so much alike, and obviously 2 different dads.
So
Yeah.
they
But
must take after
they
you,
what?
they must take after you then?
right?
They definitely take after my side. They both look like, so my brother just got married and they don't have kids yet, and they both look like they could be his son. So I was like, well, when you guys start having a family, you
Yeah,
know what
you
your
know
kids are
what
going to
they're
look like. So
Unless her
it's
genes
funny,
are
just
stronger, but
yes, they blondies, the same exact facial features, just one has brown eyes, one has blue eyes.
Oh
So
my,
it's
that-
really fun. Actually, just the other day we were swapping pictures because I sent her a picture. I sent my birth son's mom a picture of my son, and she sent back a picture of him when he was that age. And I was like, it's the same kid,
picture.
just
no.
yes, different eye color.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. I know my birth son and my brother look so similar. I mean, my birth son is half black and my brother is not. So there's
Yeah.
that difference. Like my brother
Yeah.
wishes he had his skin tone because it's like this beautiful like mocha color. But they
Yes.
have the same mannerisms, they have the same facial expressions. I'm like, how is that even possible? Like you never have met each other.
Yeah.
But it's so
Yeah.
weird.
Passed down.
Yeah, like just
traits
the
learned
I
or-
know it's
Yeah.
it's crazy, but it's also so cool to see those little things in, you know, in your person because then it makes you not that you didn't feel connected, but it just makes you feel like it makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside. Like, oh, I feel really content with where we
Yeah.
are, right? And where my son
Yeah.
is or where I am in life. And it just comes full circle.
Yeah, it gave
Yeah.
Zachary, my youngest, having, I think it was a lot for him because he had, out of my 4, he would have been the one to want to go and search for his birth mom
Yeah.
or learn all the information and stuff, which I wouldn't have a problem with. But he, after he has these 2, he's been content
Yeah.
and doesn't
Wanted to
talk
let- yeah.
no, because he has the 2. And the youngest one, the little girl that my sister's raising, my niece, she looks so much like my son, it's crazy.
Mhm.
I mean, they have such similar features, body structure, everything. They're very petite.
Yeah.
So even though my son, I mean, he's like 5'5", I think. They're not very tall, and they're very thin. His sister was very thin and very athletic.
Yeah.
So my son could do any sport and be good at it.
Of course.
I mean, that's just the type of, that was just,
That's just who they are. They're like baseball. Yeah, that sounds good. Football, sure.
he did football
Yeah.
and track.
And then they're like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I know, right?
Okay, I have to ask you, Samantha. So before I placed a baby for adoption, I had known a family in my church that had like adopted babies, but other than that, I didn't really know about adoption. I mean, it's like you kind of know what it is, but you don't. So how did you, like you said, once you got pregnant and you're very pro-life, so you just automatically went and searched adoption agencies. What was your like? Did you have any type of relationship with adoption before this happened, or you just like knew? How did that all come to?
Yeah, no, I mean, I didn't. I mean, I had one friend from childhood who was adopted, and she met her birth mom later on in life, and it was just very like, okay, just no need or desire to have a relationship after that first meeting. And then my aunt and uncle adopted from China, so I do have a cousin that's adopted, and so I that was probably the most recent one I'd had. But other than those 2, I mean, not much. And so I didn't know much about it other than their 2 experiences. There was a lot of learning about it and researching and, just kind of versing myself in it. And so it was kind of a new concept for me. I didn't think it was something I would ever do, but you also don't think you're ever going to be in that situation. So, and I mean, I remember being like 4 or 5 months pregnant, and I'd kind of been going between parenting, adopting, and I was in the shower washing my hair, and I just came to the realization that no matter what I pick, parent or adopt, this isn't what I had planned, but my life is going to change forever, regardless of the decision I make. And And I just felt like all of a sudden God was just telling me like, you need to start looking at agencies. And so that's when I started. Cause like I said, those first several months, I was just kind of in denial, and I was very numb to what I was even going to do. And then right about 5 months is when I started looking at the agencies, exploring all different agencies.
Yeah. How did you go about, did you look out of state agencies? Did you look in state? What was there any criteria that you were like looking for, or just kind of like, I just got to gather information and like the family, like I'll just feel which agency is going to be right for me?
Yeah, I definitely went by what felt. I mean, I called 4 or 5 different agencies, and it was really who I connected with. I mean, I could tell you immediately who I would not have gone with based on that experience. They treated me like I was trash, and like they did not care about the birth mom. They care about the adoptive family. And I was like, nope, and cross them off. But the ones that showed such compassion to me and first just talked to me for me and how are you feeling? How is this for you? They didn't ask me about the baby or my due date or anything. They wanted to know, how are you? These are the services we do for a birth mom after placement, the counseling. And so, I didn't have in my mind any certain agency, but when I had those first initial conversations, and I felt that care towards me as the birth mom, that that made my decision so much easier,
Yeah.
because I knew after placement how I would be treated. And so I really, my adoption advocate I had and counselor, they were wonderful. So
So what
it's
did
just
your
really,
advocate do for you? Was it kind of like they would, like, obviously you had your counselor who did the counseling, but like, what did the advocate do with you through the
she
agency?
she was just I had her personal cell phone, and I could call her at any point. And I mean, there was just time, like there would be little things that would just trigger me throughout the pregnancy where I would think I can't do adoption, and I would call her and we would just talk through things. And the whole time she said, if you don't want to do this, you don't have to do this. Like, this is okay. If you feel this way, like, she never made me feel guilt or shame for saying maybe I do want to parent, and she just really became a friend, and she wrote me the sweetest card at the end. But I mean, I could call her at 10 o'clock at night and she would answer. And she just was really there for me. And then at the very end of my pregnancy, I connected with another birth mom. And like I said, this was so crazy. I was living in DC, and I connected with this birth mom who was a friend of a college roommate who was like, I know this person who knows this person who placed their son in college, put me in touch. And of all the places, this woman lives in Nashville, Tennessee. And after I placed my son, a year and a half later, my job transferred me to Nashville, Tennessee. And I reached out to her, and we met for the first time. And I wish I had met her months
Years
before
ago.
that,
Yeah.
because we met at the very end. And she, you can talk to counselors and you can talk to your best friends and your coworkers and your mom, but no one knows what you go through except another birth mom or birth parent. And that was like the hardest thing for me, is in the grieving process, just no one understood. Like, people are like, it'll be okay. It's just like, have you gone through this? Like, this is the most heart-wrenching thing I've ever done in my life. I didn't get out of bed for days. And I mean, it was maybe 2 weeks. My mom finally got me out of bed. I went home for a month and a half. And then on that day of the relinquish, when I knew it was final, oh my gosh. I mean, it's devastating. Like,
Yeah.
just to know, like, this is official, even though it's what you wanted the whole time,
Yeah.
nothing prepares you for that. And so, I was able to talk to my advocate then, but I also talked to this other birth mom, and she was just amazing. Like I said, I wish everyone going through this process would connect with a birth mom early on. I because that was something that just was like my saving grace. So I recommend that for anyone that's considering out there, get involved with those groups. There's so many out there.
Did you have the opportunity through the agency to have any like birth mom support groups during the pregnancy, or just your counseling?
Um, no, there weren't any birth mom support groups. And And it's hard to find one because I remember Googling like adoption groups, and it was all like adoption support groups for people, couples who are trying to adopt,
Yeah.
not so much on the birth family. So like I said, I mean, we're now almost a decade since my placement, and I am just now, like I told you about one before we started
Yeah.
recording. I just found out about a new one just a couple months ago that I'm getting involved with. But that's what I want to just keep doing because it wasn't talked about as much 10 years ago as it is today, and as it
Yeah.
will continue to in another 10 years. And I hope it's people like us that can just keep spreading the positivity and the success stories. And it's beautiful for both parties involved, but they need to know more on the birth mom side.
Yes, totally. Which is why like even before I got this job with the agency, I was like, people need to know, like people need to talk to birth moms. Like it's just they're so
Yes.
there's it's such like a layered situation. And because every story is so different and so beautiful and the one thing too, it's interesting. We did a podcast last week and the woman that I was chatting with, she said that adoption is like a triangle, right? She didn't say this, but like everyone knows it's like the adoptive family, the birth son, and then the birth family. But she's like, it's actually more of like a constellation because you not only have the adoptive families and the birth families and the birth children, but you also have the aunts and uncles, the grandparents, the cousins, all the other people that are affected because it's not just those three people unfortunately that are affected by this adoption. And while like I had a niece who was 2 years old when I placed my son, she just barely met him at 23. And I'm like, all
Right.
those years that she missed out on as as a cousin. And so, the adoption world is ever changing where we only thought it affected this small portion of people here, where it's this whole galaxy of people. But it's also like in a night sky, right? If you're out camping, you look at the night sky, how beautiful it is and how the constellations and just the majesty of it all. You're like, that's how adoption is.
Well, and I also think that birth parents, you need to think that when we adopted our children, no one in my husband's family had ever thought about adoption, or even it was a foreign word to them. And so by us adopting, it opens doors for other people
and opens conversations.
Yeah. So by placing, and I mean it's like a giving tree that doesn't stop.
Yeah.
It just keeps giving because it just keeps moving like a ripple. It just keeps going on forever. It's ever changing, ever growing and reaching.
Yeah.
So things that you guys started,
which is crazy because you're like something so sad and tragic, can be so beautiful.
Yeah.
How did your parents, how did they handle it when you told them like you were pregnant? And then obviously, I mean, you were 24, so you're an adult. It's not like you're a teenager living at their house, but what were their thoughts about all of this and their support?
Yeah. I was very scared to tell them. I come from a very traditional home. My parents, they did it all the right way, quote unquote. And actually when I found out I was pregnant, I was trying to decide how to tell my parents, and I'm 12 hours away. So it's not like I can just go tell them in person. So I wanted to tell them in person. So I was trying to plan a trip back home, and my grandmother passed away. And so I had to go home to my hometown with all my family and aunts and uncles and my parents and cousins. And I wasn't showing yet because I had just found out, but I went the whole weekend and I didn't tell them because I was just like, oh, they had enough going on and I was so scared. And it took me a couple weeks to muster up the courage to tell them, but they honestly were so supportive either way. I hadn't lived at home in years. I'd been out on my own working and having my own job. And so they didn't want that for me either, to move home and have them help me raise a baby. And I didn't want that. I didn't want to move back home and, have my parents help me raise a baby. Like I have said, I wanted him to have a mom and a dad in the home. And, I know my dad would have been an amazing father figure for him, but that wouldn't have been his father. Like his father wouldn't have been in the picture then or seen, in the normal day-to-day picture. So they told me either way, whether I chose to parent, whether I chose to choose adoption, they would support me. And, you know, there was just a lot of times of going back and forth, and I know they would have supported me either way, but when I said I wanted to do adoption, they stood by me that whole time. They never tried to sway me, which then after I placed him and I, you know, was just having such a hard time, you know, I'm getting angry with them and I'm like, you should have told me to keep him. This is the hardest thing I've ever done. You know, I mean, because I wanted someone to blame and I was hurting, and, you know, but they let me make that decision and they were nothing but supportive. I can't imagine what they had to deal with watching me go through that, because I was just a wreck afterwards. And I don't think they knew what to say or do. My brother didn't know what to say or do. How do you find the words?
Yeah.
But my family has been so supportive, and, you know, they've all spent time with my birth son and they all just love him. You know, both my birth son and my son look like my brother, who look like my dad. So they all just look like him. And
You're like, I'll just stand, just you guys go to over there. We're gonna take a picture of you guys and just like it's like Pete and repeat and repeat and repeat.
Generation.
yes, yes.
I
So
love that everybody is so like intertwined and that he's been part of weddings and so you guys
Yeah.
must live in a close proximity to him then, do you, or not super close?
no, we're 8 hours away now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so it's
So
big. It's usually like spring breaks and weddings and big events where you guys see each other. And do you guys
yes.
FaceTime and stuff or?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll FaceTime. You know, he doesn't have a phone yet, so not texting, but he'll FaceTime from his parents. And then I mean, we typically see each other at least 3 times a year.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we were just talking because we had my brother's wedding in September. So we're like, okay, what's going to be our next outing? So my son and him, their birthdays are a week apart.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so that's always hard because we're like, okay, which weekend is his birthday? Which weekend is my son's birthday?
Yeah.
So we're always trying to figure that out. So we're already trying to figure out summer plans and if I'm going to go up see them with the kids or if they're going to come here. So yeah, we were actually just talking about that yesterday about
Oh,
our next little outing. So
your next
it's fun.
adventure. I know.
Have to plan it.
I know.
Yes.
Seriously. I know my son's out in Virginia right now and I'm like, when am I going to see you next? And he's like, well, your mom invited me out to Santa Barbara. And I was like, well, she didn't invite me. That's super rude.
Is that where your mom lives?
Yes.
I'm gonna go visit your
Okay.
mom.
That's where I was raised.
I
You knew
know.
that.
In California by then.
Oh yeah, Santa Barbara. So she's like, oh yeah, he called me the other day and like we were just chatting and he's gonna like take a gap year and I told him he could like come stay with us and I'm like,
Excuse me.
Yeah.
what? I'm like, what? Like, can I come stay with you? Can you also
Yeah.
pay for me and my family to come?
I love Santa Barbara.
Yes.
So pretty.
But I do love that they have that relationship that he
Yes.
can call and
Yeah.
talk to her and
She
like,
invited him to
and
come
she invited
stay.
him to come stay, which like he's never been. So I was like, but also I'm like, I want to be there for his first time being in my
Yes. Oh, I know.
hometown.
Well, you can go.
I know I can go. She doesn't have to invite
I
me
mean,
for me to. I
no,
can just
you
show up at her house.
I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'm
I'll totally show
coming.
up. Yeah, yeah,
No,
exactly. I'm like, like, just knock on the door. She doesn't care.
No.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you this one last question because I think our time is almost up. Unfortunately, we could just talk for hours. Let's see. So, what common misconception about birth moms do you think needs to be changed?
You know, what I want people to know is that for many of us, this is the hardest decision that we're ever going to make in our lives. I mean, I truly stand by that. I don't think I will do anything harder than what I did. And the biggest misconception is just, or I guess what I want people to be educated on and things that I was even ignorant to before I was a birth mom is don't judge. You have no idea what someone's reasons are for placing or what challenges they have faced or what challenges they're going to face if they chose to parent. And, you know, for me, I was so worried about everyone judging and people saying, well, you can do it, you can do it. But no one knows your situation better than you. And like I said, I feel like I was even ignorant to this before I was a birth mom because I was just like, how could you do that? But no one knows your situation better than you. And like, you have to trust yourself. And and anyone else that's going to judge you or think that you're trying to get out of something, we are making the most selfless decision there is. And it's one of the hardest. And I just wish people would just show more compassion in that regard, and just not judge us. Or, everyone I have told, now in the last 10 years have been so great, and they want to hear about the story because they just don't know much about it. But there have been a couple comments that have been hurtful too. And, all I can say is those people are just hurting inside. And that's a personal thing, because I don't know how you can judge someone for
Yeah.
making the most heart-wrenching decision of their life. So I just wish people knew, no matter the age, you're making a decision at a young age or at an older age or whatever, you don't know the situation someone's in.
Yeah.
So we all have our reasons for doing it, and, just accept that's what we've prayed about, and that's where our heart is.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's the hardest thing too, as a birth mom. You're like, people are going to judge me, especially if you grew up in a traditional household, which I did as well. And so it was like,
Yeah.
my mom felt that too. Like, what about the shame? What about the judgment that I'm going to get because my daughter has done this? And then there's my own judgment. Like, people are going to judge, like people are going to look at my finger and like not see that I'm married. And like,
Are you
like,
talking about
Yes.
if you
no,
adopted?
even when I was pregnant, like when I was
Oh.
pregnant, because I
You
moved up
were-
to Utah. And so every time I went to the mall, every time I went to dinner, every time I was like, oh my gosh, people are judging me because I see people looking at my left hand. They
Yep.
don't see, which is ironic because I
Yep.
actually don't wear my wedding ring. So it's like, I'm like, I don't know why I cared so much. Like, people knew it's like, oh, she's not married. I'm like, I could have totally been.
You used to care.
I used to
Now-
care because
now
I was
you don't.
18.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
18, 19, and I cared what people thought. Now I'm 41 and I'm like, I am going to give everyone the middle finger because I don't really care what anybody thinks.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
could be married as long as I have, and you take it off and you still look like you're wearing a ring.
Well, to be fair, I am a hairdresser, and the reason I
That's
take my
it.
phone
Oh,
or my
yeah.
ring off is because I'm in water a lot,
Yeah.
and my
Yeah.
diamonds are pave, and so the water gets caught underneath, and then it gives me this huge red rash, and it's super itchy,
Ooh.
and so I just
Yeah.
don't wear it because
Yeah.
it's annoying. So
That would
Yeah.
be,
there's that. Anyways,
there's that.
Yes.
thank you, Samantha, so much for joining us today. It's been so good to talk with you, and hopefully we can stay in touch and
I would love that.
to hear about how the dinner goes, the hosting on May 9th goes with you. And
Yes.
I'm gonna
Come to
check out
Nashville. Have y'all
I-
ever been? Come on.
I
No,
have
I
been to
have-
Nashville
I
and it's
haven't.
amazing, and I would
I-
go tomorrow.
I would go too.
Okay.
So
Well, come
I'll
on.
talk
It's
to
going
my
to be a
mom,
really
see if I
fun
can-
venue, and I'm excited. And it's going to be all birth moms getting to connect. And so, yeah, I'm really excited for that. I'll let
Will
you know how it
s-
goes.
actually send me the dates and information?
Yes.
Because maybe I'll
There you go.
come.
Yeah.
Like maybe I'll
Yes.
am I invited?
You're invited, and
But
you
be
can
myself.
you can stay with me. You don't even have to get a hotel.
Oh my
No.
god.
Like 20
Are
minutes
you
from the venue.
serious?
Yes. Oh my
I
gosh,
really,
yes.
I really am. I'm gonna go
think
home and talk to my husband, and really, he's gonna say
Yes.
that's fine. So I'll be in touch with you because I think that would be
Okay.
amazing. Oh my
It will
gosh.
be so fun. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited
Okay,
for
one
it.
thing I want to ask,
Oh,
though,
go ahead.
that I always like to ask the birth moms: would you make the same decision
Oh,
that
again.
you
Oh,
did?
yeah.
Would you place your child? Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's good for people to know that, because we do talk about a lot of loss and pain,
Yeah.
and if people only think about that point of it, and not think of the whole spectrum of it,
Yeah.
they get scared. I don't know. I would think that you would get. I would be scared.
No,
Well, yeah,
I'm so
It'd be a
glad.
nightmare. Honestly, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. So you guys are stronger than.
No,
Mhm.
I would choose again. And I think this and say this all the time. I wasn't headed down a bad path by any means, but I mean, I was 24, and I was, just having fun and kind of living a reckless life. And it, after I went through that and I got the job transferred to Nashville, I met my husband, I had my kids, I found Christ again. And I mean, I'd always been a Christian, but I kind of strayed in my 20s, and that experience brought me so much closer. I got
Yeah.
baptized 2 years ago. This is before my son was born, but my daughter was standing right next to me with my husband. I got water baptized, and And I've dove so much more into the word and being in small groups, sharing my story. You know, we were just briefly commenting, like I was from a small town as well. I was embarrassed and ashamed to, you know, I was afraid of what my parents were going to feel like. And I was just like, screw it. This is my story. If I can help someone, like call me, you know, if you know
Yeah.
someone struggling with this, like this is what I was put on this earth to do. And so no, I wouldn't change anything, because where I am today, I don't know if I would be in this situation.
Yeah.
um so
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I'd like to.
We're the same. I said the same thing.
Yeah.
When they asked me that question, I said that. I mean, I thought about it for a minute, but
Yeah.
I said the same thing, because you wouldn't be. You wouldn't be
Yeah.
who you are. You wouldn't be where you are. And it's part of, like, life is messy, right? So,
Yeah.
Life is messy.
and
Yeah.
so you're like, give me the mess. Like, I'm always like, I always joke, because I'm like, you know, everyone sins, quote unquote sins, right? Or, you know, whatever you want to call it. And I just wore mine proudly out. Like, pregnancy, here I am. Like, it is what it is.
Yes.
You can just see mine. Most people, you can't see what they're going through. You can't see their struggle. You can't see their addiction. You can't
Yes.
see any of that. And like,
Yeah.
I don't even think it's unfortunately. Fortunately for us, like, we were able to just kind of like wear it on our sleeve and be like, this is who I am. Like, this is my story. And I would love to help whoever wants to be helped, because I am a judgment-free zone, because I've been in
Yes.
that judgment place, you know, where you're like, I'm not judging anybody else. Anybody can come to me at any time and tell me anything, and I will not judge them, because I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know how I would handle that either.
You know, I was just thinking, because I know that you talk about support groups. What about like making like a birth mom phone tree?
Oh, so you can like call people to be
So,
like,
yeah.
I am losing it.
So yeah, well, kind of, yes. So like with our birth moms
Yeah.
that are because we have coordinators and everything with them and stuff. But if they wanted to specifically talk to a birth mom who's
yeah.
been in, you know what I mean?
I mean, I
Just
would
like
totally
a-
be okay to be on that list.
Yeah.
Like, put me on
like
there,
a-
and
like kind of
Yes.
you know, not a referral list, but
No.
just like a list like that, you know, oh, this person says you can reach out if you need to reach out to a birth mom that's been through it. And you just need someone to talk
Yeah.
to about it that would understand.
well,
I know you would be
Well,
willing,
no,
but
and
that's why
I'm thinking-
I heard her say that she would be willing too.
well, but I also think, like, with you, Samantha, like, when you were laying in bed for those 2 weeks, maybe it would have been nice to text someone and be like, I can't get out of bed.
Yeah.
I can't. And then
Yeah.
just have them come over, and like, I've gone to friends' houses when they're dealing with other things, and like, you just crawl in bed with them, and you're like, I'll lay here and I'll cry with you, and I'll just like,
Yeah.
because this, like, I felt the same way. Like, my mom had to physically remove me from my bed every
Yeah.
single day, force me to go on a walk with her, and I would just sob. I would just cry. My milk
Yeah.
was still coming in, and I would just like,
Yes. Oh, and no one talks about the postpartum stuff. You go
no.
home and you still have your milk coming in and you still are wearing a diaper because you just gave birth. And it's like, you know, and that stuff is so triggering. And,
Yes.
you know, I mean, because you're going through all that and you don't have a baby in your arms. And there's
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really hard. Nobody talks about the postpartum. They talk about the
No.
postpartum of like the family and where the baby's been placed, but they're not like, so how is the
The
birth mom
story of
doing?
the
And
birth
we've
mom.
tried to talk. We did a podcast actually recently, her and I, and where she was asking me questions about the postpartum, because I was like, these are the things that I went through, and these are the things that I would sit in the bath with red cabbage leaves, just crying, and
Yes.
they're just
Oh my
everything's
gosh.
leaking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
It's
if you don't have
awful.
support, I can't imagine where you would be.
I
You know, I
know.
mean, I just cried to my mom every day. I mean, it was, yeah, it's
Yeah.
And supports a
not a fun time. Yeah.
No.
But
And like
no,
you
I
said,
would,
oh, go ahead.
yeah. No, I just like what you said about the phone tree. I would love to be added to that. I mean,
Yeah.
seriously, anyone that is considering adoption or knows someone or just anyone dealing with the unplanned pregnancy, please give them my number,
Okay.
my
Yeah.
Instagram, whatever.
Yeah.
All of
I
the
would love to
things.
connect
things.
all the things.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
will you send me your Instagram handle, and I'll
Yes.
follow you?
Okay.
I want to follow all the birth moms,
Yep.
all the things.
Yep.
Okay, so
Yes.
this has been so great, and I'm really seriously send me all the info about May 9th.
I will. Okay,
So-
I will.
Okay, well, thank
It'll be
you for
so
joining
fun.
us today. And if you or anybody you know is considering adoption, please visit our website at aactiveloveadoptions.com.